going to be looking at what is the process for us to follow when we sit for the exams. I proved to you today that with a short amount of time, you can write quite a lot and quite a good story as well, right? So I already mentioned when we go into the preparation phase, the first 5 minutes, we want to be highlighting our keywords. We want to be looking out for at least one of the pictures, and the picture should be the picture that shows the problem. And you can use all 3 pictures, but you must use at least one. Now, can anyone tell me what happens if you forget to use a picture? Yeah, again, Kaylin, go ahead.
You fail.
It is very likely that you will not be able to do well for your composition, right? Because the composition must be based on the theme, the keywords, and the picture, right? So you must have them both in your writing. So it is important from the first paragraph to always connect your writing to the picture. So if the story is about something happening at home, then your first paragraph should be set in the home. If your story is something about something happening in the canteen, then your story should happen in the school, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how you connect the picture to the theme and to the writing of your story. Okay, so match your theme. So always remember, you should be thinking about 4 to 5 paragraphs. Okay, and these 4 to 5 paragraphs should match the story mountain points, right? Can you also remember the story mountain points? Okay, good. Now, which points are most important in story mountain points? Jasper?
Climax.
Is it just the climax that is the most important? Notice that when I asked you the question, I say which points are most important in the story mountain, right?
Climax.
Yeah. Yi-Chen, go ahead.
You said that the most important parts are where it's at the top of the mountain.
So what is at the top of the mountain? Which 3 points are there?
Falling action.
What else? And the rising action, right? Okay, so rising action, climax, and falling action are the 3 points on top of the mountain that we need to pay close attention to, right? And we need to write most of our words in these 3 sections. So your paragraph 2, 3, and 4 tend to be your more important paragraphs, and you need to spend a lot more time. How do we spend more time? I'll show it to you later, okay? And I'll use the model that we used earlier, okay? So can you all remember this? Okay, this was the story that more or less that we wrote, or rather I wrote for you in 10 minutes earlier, right? And in this story, right, you can see, not exactly, right? It's not exactly the same. You can see what I include. Okay, so in the introduction, I want to include the weather. I want to include some reason why the story is taking place. Okay, so I'm giving you some background information. Now, is there anything you'd like to ask me about for this paragraph? Do you all understand what should go into an introduction? Okay, if you look at the previous slide, it says that we are to include the weather, the information and description of the character, as well as some background information. Okay, Andrea, did you raise your hand?
You said that you wrote the different composition today, but then now this one is different also.
It is different, right? Can you tell me what's the biggest difference between the one that I wrote in the lab and the one that I'm presenting to you right now? What's the biggest difference, right, that you can see? Eriksha, what do you think is the biggest difference?
You added their names.
What does that mean? I want you to be more specific than the fact that I added their names, okay?
You added the names James and Janice.
I want you to be even more specific. Thank you very much. Titus, go ahead.
You added more details in the first paragraph. Earlier, you did not add any details.
Okay, I added some details and descriptions about the character, but there's something even more important that I changed. Andrea, go ahead.
The information about
Not really the information. Gautam?
the feeling of the character.
Not quite. Thaddeus? Last person, then I'll tell you the answer.
The characters look.
Okay, not really. Okay, as I said, that was the last one. Can you notice that I changed the perspective of the story? In the story that I wrote this morning, right? I was writing from my own perspective, right? I was the character. Can you notice in this story that I am no longer the character, right? I am now the narrator, right? And James has become the character. Can you all see? So Ericsha was alluding to that, right? That I included names to it. And then I changed the perspective, right? So now it's no longer I, it's James. James is the character. Now, why did I do this? Why did I not keep myself as the character? Why did I change my character to James? Anybody has any idea? Why do you think that I did that? Why didn't I just keep the story with I? All right, Brenna, go ahead.
So that the reader does not read the same thing over and over again.
No, that's not true because you're only reading my story once, right? You will not get to read my story twice, okay? As an examiner, you only read it once. Now, the main reason is because I want to describe the character. You get it? Can you see over here at the bottom, in paragraph 1, okay? In paragraph 1, that I'm describing James was an active and outgoing boy who loves spending time with his friends. Now, don't you think it's easier for me to describe him if I am not him? Imagine if I'm describing myself. I was an active and outgoing boy who loved to spend time with my friends. That would sound a bit weird, right? Okay, to introduce yourself and to describe yourself is a bit strange. That's why if I want to describe my character, which I told you all was one way we could improve the introduction, then I need to change the perspective, right? So I am no longer the character. I'm the narrator describing James, who is the character. I can describe what he looks like. Okay, but in the exams, you can choose either to write as James, you are the character, or you are the narrator. You can choose, but please don't change between the two. You have to be consistent. If you want to be the character in the story, which I feel is easier, then you just use I. But then that may mean that you will not be able to describe yourself very much if you are the main character. Do you understand? Okay, so I wanted to demonstrate how to describe the character by using a different perspective, okay? And that's why I changed the perspective from I to James, all right? Okay, so no other questions about this paragraph? Do you all understand why I did what I did? Okay, now we go on from the introduction to the rising action, and that is when the problem takes place, right? Okay, so in this case, it's very similar, right? It's the lightning that triggers the problem. Okay, the thunder, the sound of the thunder startling me. Okay, Nguyen, can you please sit up straight? I don't want you lying down in the middle of a lesson, please. Thank you very much. Okay, please be in proper posture and in proper seating whenever you're having a lesson. This is not a session for you to relax. This is a session for you to pay attention. And just as I'm seated upright and giving you my full attention, I expect you to do the same. Is that clear? Okay, whenever we are learning, let's be with the right disposition, with the right posture, with the right behaviors, right? Otherwise, this will interfere with our learning and it will not be very effective. Okay, so don't be sloppy. Don't lie down flat on your back. Don't, look at the screen from the bottom. Sit up straight and put it in a position where you can easily and quickly focus and respond to me. All right, thank you very much. I have to keep reminding you, Okay, so over here, we find the problem gets worse, okay? And the reason why this problem happens is because my character, James, is focusing too much on his mobile phone. Can you all see that? Okay, he's obsessed with it, right? He can't get his eyes off it. Which expression tells me that he cannot, stop looking at his phone? Which expression tells me that? Hugo?
His eyes were still glued.
His eyes still glued to the screen of his phone, right? Yeah. So he cannot take his eyes off the phone, right? His eyes were glued to the phone. Can you see that this is a kind of metaphor, right? I'm likening his focus to as if his eyes were glued onto the phone. Okay. So I use similes and metaphors, right? And you notice at the bottom, as fast as light. Can you remember where this came from? Remember, as fast as light came bouncing back. Can you remember where that came from? Anyone? Who remembers where that came from? Okay, I have a few hands. Okay, Shan, where did that come from?
Fearless Phil.
Fearless Phil, right? Remember, we talked about as fast as light came bouncing back, he tumbled down the mountain track, remember? Okay, so we can reuse some of the things that we've learned in Stella, right? Especially similes and metaphors, right? They're very good for describing things happening, right? In this case, right, he waved his arms frantically. So I changed my expression. Instead of saying pinwheeling my arms, I got a little bit bored with that, right? Because I've used it 2 or 3 times already. So I changed it to waving his arms frantically, all right? So there are different ways to express your character falling and losing his balance. And it's up to your creativity to come up with different ways to do so. So Mr. Pang changed it a little bit. Can you all see? He waved his arms frantically. right? He tried but failed to regain his balance, and then he tumbled down the stairs, okay? So I broke down the action into 3 separate sections. Remember, don't summarize, don't teleport, right? You don't want to suddenly be on the ground, right? Not having described how you got onto the ground in the first place. You want to break it down into 3 distinct actions. So first, right, he was startled by the thunder. Then he waved his arms frantically, but couldn't regain his balance. And then he tumbled down the stairs as fast as light. Okay, so this is my rising action. Now the problem gets worse. So how does this problem of falling down the stairs get worse? Anybody? Yes, Brandon, go ahead.
His leg got stuck and then he suddenly started squirming and his leg broke.
So the injury that he sustained, Tammy, sit up straight, please. No lying down. I already told you this. Okay, I expect all of you to be seated up right when you are having this lesson. I don't want anybody reclining or sleeping in your bed, because this is not a sleeping session. This is a learning session. Okay, and please bear in mind also that you're being recorded. So, you know, your actions are important and they are part of this recording. Okay, right. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's see how the problem gets worse, right? So again, remember, the problem gets worse before it gets better, right? So in this case, right, as he was falling down, he landed on his elbow, right, with a loud thud, and a sharp pain shot through it. Okay, remember the sharp pain? Remember the scream of agony, right? Those were some ways that we showed our character in pain, right? Okay, and then cold sweat poured down his face, right? Because, you know, when you are injured, right, you tend to, like, you know, get really, really, you know, very trembly and shivery, right? Okay, so he screamed in agony, clutched his arm, and then cold sweat poured down his face, right? So these are ways you can describe your character in pain, right? And then we also talked about how somebody needs to come in to rescue your character. And please remember that Janice and James are not doctors, huh? They cannot heal themselves, huh? Okay, you cannot have them performing surgeries or checking on their wounds and making sure that they are okay. You can't do that, right? So you have to make sure that you remember that your characters are only kids or children and they don't have the means to help themselves. Okay, so you need to seek help elsewhere. And in this case, right, they quickly called their parents, right? And calling their parents would be the way to solve the problem, right? So the next paragraph is going to be how I solve the problem. Remember, falling action is when I solve the problem, okay? And this is how I solve it. And at this point, the story is already coming to an end, right? Okay, because I'm coming into my 220 over words already. I'm finishing it off very quickly. Okay, so here, I just want to quickly tie up any loose ends, right? So what happened to James? What his parents do to help him, right? Because his parents are also not doctors, right? They can't treat him, so they got to bring him somewhere, right? So the easiest place would be to bring him to a clinic to see a doctor. Now, many of you wrote about calling an ambulance and bringing the person to a hospital. Do you think that such an injury warrants going to the hospital? No. What kind of injury would qualify for being hospitalized or being transported to the hospital in an ambulance? Dylan?
Broken leg.
Okay, something that's broken. Good. Alexander? Javian?
Spraining your ankle.
Spraining your ankle is not serious enough. You don't go to the hospital for a sprain, yes? Okay, only when something breaks. Or Andrea?
Fainting.
Yes, when you lose consciousness, especially when you hit your head, right? So if you're falling down the stairs and you hit your head and you black out, for example, now that is a cause for hospitalization. Do you all understand? Anything to do with the head or anything to do with broken bones, automatic hospitalization. You can call the ambulance immediately and they'll come gladly. Okay, but if you sprain your arm or you have a cut or if you scald yourself, that may not be serious enough. Go to the clinic and the doctors there will be able to treat you, okay? Yes, Ian, what is it?
Go. Oh no, my God, I'm not muted.
Breaking your bones.
Yes, we already mentioned that, right, Ian? We already said bones breaking, right? And I mentioned it several times. Are you not able to hear me, Ian? Can you hear me clearly? Okay, because I've already mentioned it a few times, bones being broken or head being injured or you losing consciousness. Those are the things that will qualify you for hospitalization. But if it is like a burn, a cut, you know, a swelling, a sprain, then usually these are not serious enough for you to go to the hospital. Got it, everybody? Right? If everybody called in the ambulance because they got a sprain, or if they got a bruise, or if they, you know, got a bit of an ache, then, you know, there won't be enough ambulances to go around. Okay, so let's keep the ambulance and the hospital for really serious injuries. All right, so that's just something to remind all of us. Usually, with minor injuries like a sprain, right? In this case, no broken bones, right? They're not sure. Then a clinic would be good enough, right? To find out. And of course, sometimes the doctor can refer us to the hospital if it's more serious. For example, if after they examine you and they find that there's a fracture. Do you know what's a fracture? Yeah. Anybody tell me what's a fracture? Okay, let me call someone I've not called yet. Shupo, go ahead. What's a fracture?
Like bone breaking?
No, it's not the same as breaking bones. No, breaking bones are more serious, right? So a fracture is not as serious as a bone breakage. But what is it exactly? Tammy, for the second time, can you please sit up straight? Thank you. All right. Is there anybody who knows what a fracture is? Thaddeus? I can't hear you, Thaddeus. Andrea?
Hairline cracked.
Is it like your bone has a bit of crack?
Yeah, right. That a fracture is basically a crack in your bone. Now, do you know the difference between a crack and a breakage? Yeah, right. A crack simply means that your bone is still intact. There's nothing wrong with your bone. Your bone is still together. There's a little bit of a crack in it. But a breakage means the bone breaks into two, right? There's a break in the bone. So obviously breaks are more serious, right? Okay, they're much more serious. So cracks, though fractures are also quite serious because they'll cause a lot of pain, right? In that part where there is a fracture. Okay, so fractures can also qualify you for hospitalization because it does mean damage to your bones. Okay, so breakage and fractures, these are also quite serious and they need like immediate medical attention. Okay, so remember, please try not to involve an ambulance unless the injury is serious enough. Okay, head injury, right? Breakage of bones, these are two injuries that could qualify for hospitalization. Okay, and finally, to end off today, and I'm coming very quickly to a close. Okay, I have one more slide and I'm done. Okay, I told you all 325, right? So I'm trying to stick to that. Okay, so remember the conclusion should always include some kind of a lesson learned or a value that you have appreciated better, right? So in this case, the value of care, being careful, right? And the lesson of not being engrossed with his phone, right? When he's climbing the stairs. Those are the two important things that James learned from this experience. Okay, and one more thing I would add is, so yes, he learned the lesson, but what would change in his behavior in the future, right? So you see here that he promised his parents he would be more careful and set a good example for his younger sister. Okay, so that's the action that he would change, right? That's what he would do differently in the future, right? He promised he wouldn't, and he promised he would, right? He wouldn't play with his phone, he would be more careful, and he would set a good example for his sister. Okay. Any questions here? The story is similar to what we covered this morning, right? I'm just using it to point out some things that you should remember when you're writing your own story, right? For your composition tomorrow. And with 50 minutes to spare, you have plenty of time to do this, right? Okay, 5 minutes to plan, 45 minutes to write, and another 5 minutes to check again. Okay, or 40 minutes to write and 5 minutes to check again. So the last 5 minutes, this is what you need to check. Okay, look down the list. I would say that the most common mistake that many of you make is that you forget to use full stops to end your sentences. Do you know what Mr. Bang means by that? Right? Your sentences go on and on and on and on and on, super long, like 4-line sentences. Okay? Don't do that. Remember to use a full stop to end your sentences. A good measure is if you can breathe comfortably by reading the sentence, then it's okay. But if you run out of breath halfway through reading it, then that sentence is too long. Right? Use your breath to measure the length of your sentences. Okay? Use a full stop to end your sentences so that they don't run on and on and on, because that's a very common mistake you all make. Okay? Second mistake, a lot of you forget that you are writing a story. and then you revert to present tenses. Remember to keep your tenses in the past. Okay, because everything's happening in the past. That's why you're telling the story, right? It has already happened. Okay, so you cannot use present or future tenses when you are narrating a story that happened in the past. Okay, so remember, check all your verbs. Every time there's an action, every time there's a verb, check that it's in the past tense. Got it? Okay, these are the two most common errors. The others, I leave it to you to look at. Okay, try not to include too much dialogue. Try to be careful with your subject-verb agreement. And lastly, check your spelling. But spelling is a bit difficult because you may not know what is the correct spelling for the word. Okay, but just try your best. Okay, make sure that you don't make any careless spelling errors, and then you should be fine. Okay, right. It's 3:24. I'm true to my promise. Do you have any questions at this stage? Again, you can use this video as a very quick revision, okay, of what we covered, and I'll send the PowerPoint slides to all of you as well, so you can like click through it and refer to it. If there are no questions, then congratulations. This is our last Zoom session on compositions. Yay, good job. Okay, I've already posted the other 10 compositions in the playlist on SLS, as well as to your parents. So you can always go back and review our previous videos. But this one will be the final one, okay, for this year. Right? Good job, everybody. Well done. Okay, yay. If you have no further questions, then I wish you all a relaxing afternoon. Go and review all your work. Go and revise your vocabulary lists for tomorrow, okay? Try to look at some good phrases that you want to use for your writing. Then remember, read the theme and link to the picture carefully. All right, all the best. I'll see you all tomorrow, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.
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 Bye.